Welcome, Bronco Nation, my game review for Boise State versus Notre Dame, and welcome into the Horseshoe Spirit Studios, the title sponsor of the Bronco Blameyer Show. Whether you are still processing this loss or starting to prepare and look forward to the New Mexico game this week, make sure you grab yourself a bottle of Horseshoe liqueur, the perfect alcoholic beverage to enjoy while you get your thoughts in order from a loss like we saw, or hopefully celebrate a win for Boise State in the near future. Ask for it by name in any Southwest liquor store in Idaho, and they should have it available. If they don't, they will get it in for you. Again, the perfect drink for your company by your side while you reflect on what we've seen from the Broncos so far this season and look forward to hopefully some improvements going forward the rest of the year. All right. This is a tough one to review. Obviously, a loss to Notre Dame was expected, I think, by a lot of people, including myself, but the way that this loss went down leaves you with just a feeling in your stomach that so much more was on the table, especially when the areas of the team you expected to underperform actually rose to the challenge, and areas of the team you thought were going to be strong in this game failed to perform. This is going to be an interesting one to review. It is coming out late. I apologize for that. I have been dealing with a very bad cold the last couple of days. I actually am still under the influence of it right now. I am hopped up on cold medication, and by that I don't mean horseshoe liqueur. I actually have Dayquil, that kind of thing, and I am still dealing with it. So I'm going to try and get through this the best that I can, but this is a tough game to review. It's these post-mortem type reviews where it's been a couple of days since the loss happens. It gives you an opportunity to get your thoughts in order and kind of analyze the game from a point of non-emotion. You already know the results. Now you're trying to figure out what happened. But this is still a hard game to dissect, and I just finished rewatching it again, and I still don't know how to feel about this game. I know the fan base has a opponent in their sights, someone they would like to get their pitchforks out for, namely the quarterback for Boise State, Maddox Madsen, getting a lot of heat for this game. But when you go back and you watch this game, Maddox Madsen did not lose this game. Boise State lost this game. Now, Maddox Madsen, a key contributor to that. However, this was a loss across the board for Boise State. Keeley on offense, some letdowns on defensively, special teams. Boise State lost this game across the board. And so when we're going back and we're reviewing these types of matchups, it's important when you're looking at it from an analytical, logical point of view to look at it unemotionally, okay? Take the emotions out of it. Don't try to point fingers at just one player. Look at how did Boise State lose this game and what needs to change, not just for the rest of this season, but this is a building block game. I said that coming to this matchup. This is a game that Boise State was likely going to lose, but how they lost it could tell a lot about where the future of this program is heading. This is a rebuild team. It's a rebuild team without Ashton Jeanty, but beyond that, it was a rebuild last year, like I said in my game preview, because of what Andy Avalos did to this team for 4 years. And Ashton Jeanty just covered up a lot of those cracks. So this team has been rebuilding for a couple of seasons now, and they are still in the middle of that rebuild as Spencer Danielson tries to reinstall the traditional Boise State culture here for this program. And they were going up against a team that I said was the best. I said 22nd ranked, but 21st. I made a little misspeak in the preview video, but the best 21st ranked team that Boise State has ever played, that any team has ever played. This is a Notre Dame team that should be top 10. 100% should be top 10. There are only 2 losses this season by less than 5 points in both of those games to top 10 programs. This is one of the best teams Boise State has ever played, and they only lost by 21 points, 7-28. It was not the blowout that a lot of people were predicting. I was predicting 45-27. It was not that. Other people had it much wider margins, and actually only one person predicted the score correctly, or was even really close to predicting the score correctly in my game preview, and it is the only person, as far as I am aware, may have forgotten one along the way, but the only person, as far as I'm aware, that's actually predicted a score prediction absolutely perfectly. So congratulations to Joey Schiffer, 897. For actually predicting this score perfectly, 28-7. And the great thing too is because there was a lot of Notre Dame fans who were commenting in the game preview. If any of you are watching the game review, it was great to interact with each and every one of you. I didn't have a negative experience with a single Notre Dame fan in the comments on the game preview. However, this prediction was not a Notre Dame fan because they said praying it's the opposite. So the good news, the silver lining in all of this is that the game prediction challenge goes to a Boise State fan. So, of course, entered into a raffle for an Ashton Jeanty jersey at the end of the season. But let's get into actually reviewing this game, and let's start with the offense because that's where most of the problems in this matchup arose. Only 7 points. Only 7 points for a Boise State team that had actually had three really solid games of close to 50 points in back-to-back matchups. You thought that they were moving in a direction of maybe being able to put up something stronger. And really, in this game, they just shot themselves in the foot time and time again. Boise State, Maddox Matson, 22 for 37, 215 yards. But the key stat in that number, 4 interceptions. 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He did have a rushing touchdown on the ground, but 4 interceptions. When you look at the Boise State running game, not a single Boise State running back over 40 yards rushing. Gaines was the running back with the most yards, 11 carries for 39 yards, 3.5 yard average. And Dylan Riley had the highest average with 5 carries for 33 for a 6.6 yard average. But overall, Boise State's running game very much held in check. Some moments, Boise State, Dylan Riley broke away there at the end of the first half for a 20-yard run. Cyrus Gaines had a couple of real nice power, kind of up the middle type runs for about 10 yards. But even when Boise State would start to get its running game involved, the penalties, the holding, the false starts would push them back. And time again, Boise State's Maddox Matson found himself in third and long type territory. In the game, Boise State was 6 of 15 on third downs, and most of those were third downs that Boise State found themselves greater than 5 yards. A lot of those were in the 10-plus yard category, and most of that was because of penalties. Boise State in this matchup had 13 penalties for 112 yards. Now, not all of that was on the offense. Some of that was on the defense as well. But overall, Boise State, 13 penalties for 112 yards, which is the most penalties that Boise State has had in a game, tied for the most since 2004. The last time they had 13 penalties in a game was in 2019. And that really is it in a nutshell. This was a very undisciplined performance for Boise State. Keeley, obviously, the holding and the false starts and all of that as well, but also drop passes. There were a ton of drop passes in this game. On drive number 3, Boise State's got a little bit of a drive together. On third down and manageable, Caples just drops a pass. And later in the game, right before Max Matson throws an interception on a long third down, Ben Ford has an opportunity to cut this down to a third and manageable, and he drops a pass. There were a lot of drop passes. Maddox Matson also very undisciplined himself, throwing the ball obviously into coverage, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But overall, very undisciplined. And you could tell that the announcers for this game, the last time they watched the Boise State game was 15, 20 plus years ago, because every single time that they were talking about a penalty for Boise State, they said this is uncharacteristic, undisciplined nature for a Boise State team that's usually very much disciplined. No, that is the Boise State teams of the past. That's what Boise State has typically been. They kept referencing the Kellen Moore era, but it is not this team this season. This season has been characterized by undisciplined performances. And that was no different in this game. This was a reversal to very much what we saw in the USF game. We'd seen some of these things cleaned up, but these have been an issue all throughout the season, and they showed their head again. And that's, I think, typical. When you have your back against the wall, the true nature of your team is going to show forth. And for Boise State this season, it's a team that is very undisciplined. And that is probably the scariest thing about this performance was, again, like we said, versus USF, it wasn't that Boise State lost, it was how they lost. They looked unrecognizable. This team looked closer to Boise State. I'm not going to say they were unrecognizable, and they certainly were not as bad as what we saw versus USF, but it was still a team that's continuing to struggle to play disciplined football. And for Boise State, everything, all the trick plays, all the explosiveness, all of the creativity, all of that comes from a foundation of discipline. And when you don't have that, you can't have everything else. And people wonder, well, why aren't we having more creative offense? Why aren't we having more trick plays? Well, it's because Boise State can't even do the little things right. They can't do simple run plays without getting a holding call on them. They can't have simple passing plays without dropping them. Lots of drops this season, and especially in this game. So for Boise State, it all starts at that discipline level. And as Spencer Danielson attempts to rebuild this program, that has got to be the number one focal point going out of this game. Yes, there was missed opportunities, but the overall trend item for this team was the undisciplined nature of play. But for Boise State in the first half, it really wasn't a bad game overall. Offense actually was showing a pretty good effort. The first half, first couple of drives for Boise State, didn't really have their act together. It seemed like the moment was a little big for them. They got bailed out on a pass interference play by Notre Dame that allowed Boise State to continue their drive number one, but that drive, you could tell just from the start, it was not a drive. There was any kind of rhythm. Ended up having to punt that ball. On the second drive for Boise State, they started to get things together. Gaines has a nice run that's immediately wiped out by a holding call, and then a false start. Boise State finds themselves in 2nd and 25. Maddox Madsen takes a sack for -9 yards, and Boise State has to punt. Drive number 3, they're getting their act together again, and then drop pass by Caples. Boise State has to punt. Drive number 4, however, Boise State figured it out. The defense was doing enough to hold them in the game. At this point, it was a 6-0 game. And drive number 4, Boise State showed a spark. Drive number 4, they had a great end-around play to Bates for 7 yards. They had a perfect throw and catch on 3rd and 10, one of the few long third down conversions for this team on Saturday's performance. 3rd and 10, throw and catch to Ben Ford for 12 yards. Then they had a great pass to Marshall. Marshall, who has struggled to be consistent so far, really stepped up in this game. 4 catches for 58 yards, along with 28, including this one where he caught the ball and then ran it for another 10 or so yards upfield, and then had a late hit called against the defender. And Boise State finds himself at the 10. A great run by Sarah Gaines gets them to the run, and then a brilliant play call by Potter as Maddox Madsen pulls the ball out, fakes it, goes around the left side, and runs it in for a touchdown. That is what you wanted to see. Disciplined. I didn't note any penalties on that drive, no drop passes. Boise State moves the ball down the field efficiently. If that had been characteristic of any of the other drives for Boise State, they didn't have another drive that looked like that the rest of the game. That was the only one. And a lot of it, I think, started in the end of the first half, where Boise State, they're driving again. They're having the opportunity, the momentum. The energy is back on their side. Notre Dame has gone down and scored to kind of slow Boise State down after that quick drive for Boise State, 7-6. Then Notre Dame goes down and scores again and gets a 2-point conversion, makes it 14-7. The ball is back in Notre Dame's court. But then Boise State has an opportunity to take that momentum away. And in matchups like this, where again, we're talking about winning on the margins, right? That momentum and energy is so key, and Boise State had a chance to come out of the first half with momentum on their side. And instead of that, they're at the 30-ish type yard line. They are in a position to go down and score. Ben Ford falls down. Yes, there was some contact. It didn't look egregious. I watched that play 7-10 times. From the angle that I saw, it did not look egregious. He falls down. The ball goes over where he would have been. It's interception from Notre Dame. They kill Boise State's drive and come out of that with huge momentum. So now, to end the half, instead of Boise State having an opportunity to score in back-to-back drives, at least a field goal or something to end the half, Notre Dame has had a touchdown to end the drive. It was a very, very good drive for them. A touchdown to end the half, and then an interception, and then all of the energy was in Notre Dame's court. You could tell the way they came out in the second half. It was a very, very different performance from then on out. And for Boise State's offense, they felt that. In the second half for Boise State, they had 3 interceptions, a turnover on downs, and a punt. 3 interceptions, turnover down, and a punt. Again, all the momentum had shifted, and just from one play at the end of the second half, Ben Ford falls down. That interception was not on Maddox Madsen. There were a lot of other interceptions that certainly were on Maddox Madsen, but that one interception, not Maddox Madsen. Boise State had a decent first half. They had a really strong first drive. They were 125 yards or so total offense. They had a couple of drives where they shot themselves in the foot. Notre Dame's defense came to play. They were very, very good in this game, just like you thought they would be, but Boise State was finding ways to still create. And then the end of the first half, interception, kills any chance for Boise State there at the end of the half and brings all the momentum onto Notre Dame's court. Well, Boise State still had a chance here in the second half, despite all that, despite all the energy and the momentum, and Notre Dame coming out and scoring on their first drive to make it a 3-score game at that point. Two-score game at that point, 21-7. Despite all that, Boise State is coming out and putting a drive together in the second half. They're actually doing a solid job, and they have a great play. Matt Wagner, it's a tight end screen. We've seen those kind of consistently throughout the season, really starting to pick up. I'm loving the tight end screen options. Matt Wagner, 27 yards. He could have gone further if he hadn't tripped on his own feet towards the end of that drive. Maybe, I don't know, could have ended in a touchdown, but it wouldn't have mattered because of a terrible blindside block call on Caples, and they brought in their rules official, and he agreed, their rules official expert, and he agreed that it was a terrible call, should not have been called for a blindside block, and it was. He comes up with his hands across, hits the defender clearly in the front of the chest, and they called it a blindside block. Terrible call. Moves Boise State back from the 20 to their own 40. Maddox Madsen then takes a sack on a poor decision on his part. He should have, it was running back screen. It wasn't open. He should have thrown it away. Instead, he takes a sack on 2nd and 4, and Boise State ends up having to punt on that drive. Instead of being in a position where they could have at least, again, have gotten a field goal, or they're set up at the 20, the whole playbook is open to you. You have all this energy, and all of that because of a terrible, terrible officiating call. And I'm not saying that Boise State lost this game because of bad officiating. There was bad officiating on both sides, for Notre Dame and for Boise State, and most of the penalties that Boise State incurred were their own fault. I'm not saying in any way that Boise State lost this, but that was an opportunity. That was one of those plays that was an official's fault and changed the momentum for Boise State in that they come out in the second half, despite everything that ended the first half. They have an opportunity, and then a bad officiating call puts this in a different world. I don't know if Boise State would have won this game. I doubt it based on what we saw after that play, because Boise State had many opportunities to come back after that. The game wasn't over on the first drive. So Boise State had many opportunities, but if Boise State had been able to go down and score on that first drive, which I really think they would have been set up in a great position to do after what we saw in that drive number 4 for Boise State, where they went down and scored a touchdown in similar circumstances, if they'd been able to go down and score, make this a one-score game, they could have at least kept this a lot closer versus allowing this to devolve into a 21-point blowout like we saw at the end of the game. But for Boise State, it was all downhill from there. That one play ended up being all downhill. Drive number 2, Maddox Madsen, a bad throw, an interception into double coverage. You shouldn't have thrown it. Sarah Gaines was open for a dump off. He tries to force a pass. He thinks he sees his wide receiver breaking open. He isn't. He just is hoping that he's going to. Double covers the safety over the top and the corner coming underneath, and ends up interception. It ends up having an interception. A bad decision by Maddox Madsen, drive number 2. Okay, drive number 3. Boise State has a chance to get their breath back. Yes, Notre Dame has gone down and scored, but Boise State's had an opportunity to come. Oh, actually, at that point, sorry, Notre Dame hadn't gone down and scored. Notre Dame actually got a bunch of penalties on themselves. Boise State got lucky in that sphere, got a bunch of penalties and had to punt. So Boise State still only down 2 scores at this point. They are not out of this game. They have another chance, despite all the mistakes, despite the bad calls, despite their interceptions. They have an opportunity to still come down and win this game, and Boise State is coming down and has a great drive. Caples has a great catch and run for about 15 yards, and then Chris Marshall has a play very similar to what we saw versus Eastern Washington. That back shoulder fade where he comes up, catches the ball, and they call offensive push-off. Again, another terrible call. The defender is pushing him. He's just batting his hands away. He bats the defender's hands away, jumps and catches the pass, and they call offensive push-off. A terrible call, kills the momentum and energy in that drive. But despite all that, Boise State has a chance still. There's a Notre Dame roughing the passer call on what would have been an interception from Maddox Madsen. They're now set up 4th and 2. They have an opportunity to keep this drive going, and this was the turning point of the game. This one play here was the turning point of the game, which is why I don't say that the terrible call by the official for the blindside block or the terrible call for the push-off ends up being the determiner for the matchup, because Boise State still controlled their own destiny. They still had a shot until this play on 4th and 2. And I think this is the one, of all the decisions by Maddox Madsen in this game, this is the one that got the ire up of the fan base the most. Maddox Madsen, 4th and 2. He has an opportunity for Caples in the flat to throw the pass. Capel is wide open. And instead, he comes back to the tight end, back end. So the tight end is coming across from the backside and instead throws it to the tight end. The ball gets tipped by a defensive lineman, and it's incomplete. And that one play on Twitter, fan base lost it. And in reference to this game, that is the play. Of all the interceptions and all the mistakes, that is the play that I think is characterizing for the fan base the performance from Maddox Madsen. However, is it entirely in that one play Maddox Madsen's fault? All right. I went back and I watched that play 15 or 20 times. Slow motion, full speed. If you go back and watch that play, it is clearly a designed pass to the tight end. That is how the play is called. It is clearly a designed pass to the tight end. Maddox Madsen gives a right head fake and then comes back to throw the ball to the tight end. However, so that puts it also not just on Max Madsen, but on the offensive play caller. So this is also on Potter. It's also a tight end that looks open until the defensive lineman, who has an incredible play on the ball. Notre Dame gets a vote in all this, and they played an incredible defense on that play for the most of the matchup as well. But on that play, they fade back and tip the ball away. It looks open. It's called that way. Max Madsen is doing what the play is designed to do. However, Max Madsen is an experienced quarterback who is said to have a genius level of field awareness. Why doesn't he hit Caples, who is wide open? Well, what the fan base sees is he looks at Caples and then looks back and misses a wide open Caples. If you actually look at the moment that Max Madsen is looking at Caples, Caples isn't really open in that moment. Caples is just about to make his turn. I wish I could show you the replay of this. Unfortunately, Notre Dame ACC is blocking all highlight replays other than their official sources. So I would, otherwise I thought about it, and then I couldn't get any clips that wouldn't have my video taken down. But in that moment, Caples is making the turn to go to the flats. There is a linebacker or corner, it doesn't matter, defender, I can't tell exactly what position, but a defender, two defenders right there on Caples. One of them is going with, I think it's Ben Ford, upfield, and the other is standing there just behind Caples. Now, what ends up happening is that defender fades upfield with Ben Ford. It's a break, a busted play. They leave Caples open, but in the moment when Max Madsen is looking at him, the defender hasn't yet made his decision. You can't tell whether he's going upfield or whether he's going to stay with Caples and maybe turn that down. He's going to come down underneath and pick that play off for a pick six. Max Madsen then, under a lot of pressure, turns to where the play is supposed to go, and the moment that he turns his head, Caples breaks wide open. But at that point, Max Madsen's not looking at him. He's under massive pressure, and he throws the ball where it's supposed to go. In this circumstance, and I know that this one play is the highlight of Max Madsen's day as far as the negativity of the fan base. But if you go back and watch that one play, I don't believe that is purely Max Madsen's fault. The tight end looks open. He ends up not being because the defensive lineman fades back, but he looks open. The play is designed to go left. And for me, it's one of those unlucky moments where the defense played exactly right. They played that exactly how it needed to be. They put the just amount right pressure on Max Madsen that he could only go to really one read after Caples was not open when he looked at him, and he has to throw the pass to the tight end. There are a lot of reasons to criticize Max Madsen in this game. There really are. The constant rolling out of the pocket, some of those were designed, but not all of them. He got flushed out of the pocket. When he wasn't truly flushed, he has lots of time in that pocket. If he just stays there, and we saw him get better at that in the second half. In the first half, he was running out of that pocket way more often than he needed to be. Boise State's pass protection was actually pretty good in this game. Max Madsen kept rolling out of the pocket, reducing his throwing options to half the field, and most of the time that receiver was covered, and Boise State incompletion or near pick type situation, Boise State has to punt a bunch in the first half because of Max Madsen doing that. He had a bunch of terrible throws in this game too. Obviously the interception, the throw to Luke Voorhees that ended up being a catch was a terrible throw, but Luke Voorhees made the catch. There's a lot of reasons to criticize Max Madsen's game. He did not play his best game, and Notre Dame's defense has a big part of that. But there's a lot of reasons to criticize Max Madsen in this game, but this one play, I don't think is truly a reason to criticize him. I think that he is part of the problem there. The offensive coordinator is part of the problem there. The Notre Dame defense is part of the problem there. And I think all together in that play, it's one of those bang, bang, perfect type plays where the Notre Dame defense does exactly what they were supposed to do, and it ends up being an incompletion. That is what I saw in that play. And you can disagree with me, but I would really encourage you to go back and watch that replay a couple of times to see what I'm talking about in that moment. However, regardless of whose fault it was, that pretty much ended the chances for Boise State. Notre Dame went out the next drive, a tired Boise State defense that had been put back on the field time after time after time, again and again and again, seeing no rewards for their fruits. Did what a lot of college football defenses do in general, which is when they get worn down over and over and over again and don't have any kind of momentum coming their way, nothing from the offense doing anything on the field, they ended up letting one bust loose. You see that defenses get worn down when the offense isn't producing, and Notre Dame has a 49-yard rushing touchdown, breaks like 6 tackles to the end zone. At that point, 28-7. Boise State's in desperation mode. Max Madsen clearly starts to feel that pressure of the desperation mode, makes 2 bad decisions on back-to-back drives, 2 interceptions to end the game. Again, still some missed opportunities there, missed play, missed catch by Ben Ford that would have given Boise State a little more manageable third down instead of the 3rd and 15, 3rd and 23 that Boise State found themselves in after the drop pass and the 5-yard penalty. And then on top of all of that, it's hard for us as fans when we're watching these games and we're just seeing the television screen to know exactly whose fault it is. Spencer Janelson said the wide receivers weren't getting open. I can't say whether he's telling the truth on that or not because I can only see the about 15 yards from the line of scrimmage and Maddox Madsen. I can't see what's happening downfield beyond that from watching on the television screen. And so what you think, take that into consideration as well. Take that also into consideration that there may also be some issues with the wide receiver core, which would be a trend from last year as well. But I am going to say, without a shadow of a doubt, Maddox Madsen played a poor game, was a major contributor to the loss in this game, but he should not be the number one and only scapegoat when you're looking at this matchup. This was a team loss when it came to penalties, a team loss when it came to drop passes, a team loss when it came to offensive coordinator decisions. In some cases, I thought Nate Potter called a pretty good game overall, but there were some moments like that 4th down play that wasn't the best play call in that moment and ended up resulting in a Boise State turnover. And then, of course, Maddox Madsen, as well as part of the team, lost this game. So when you're grading this performance for Boise State offensively, I think that 315 yards of total offense, 215 yards passing, 100 yards rushing. This is a poor performance for Boise State, and it's the main reason they lost this game. The defense did enough. It wasn't a perfect performance, but it was enough of a performance we'll talk about in a moment for Boise State to have a chance to at least stick around it late in this matchup and have a chance of winning it. And the offense did not do enough. 7 points in a game of this caliber. Boise State's lucky they didn't lose this by 50 or 60 because they only scored 7 points. It is a huge hats off to the defensive performance in this one that Boise State was able to be as close as they were. So overall, in this game, a D- performance for the Boise State offense. Tons of opportunities, some good drives between the 20s, but unfortunately, a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors, players falling down, drop passes, bad throws, all contributing to a poor performance overall for Boise State offense. Now, defensively for Boise State, this was actually a really good game overall. Boise State, yes, they gave up some big plays, but they held Notre Dame to 28 points. They held Notre Dame, who scored over 600 yards versus Arkansas to only 392 yards overall of offense, 189 yards passing, which is the low. I know he's only a freshman, but for the Notre Dame quarterback, that's his lowest passing yards he's had on his career so far. And he's played 2 top 10 teams, only 189 yards passing for him, and then 203 yards rushing, and a lot of that coming on that last 49-yard run by the Notre Dame running back to basically seal the game in that sense. But overall, for Boise State, a really strong performance in this game. And in the first half, they definitely did enough to give Boise State the ball, to give Boise State a chance to win this game. Drive number 1, 4th down stop. They allowed Notre Dame to drive all the way down to the goal line, but then Irby has a great stop on a passing play there on the tight end flat to force a 4th and goal, and then a 4th and just a few yards, a 4th and 2 type situation on the Wildcat. Boise State stands up strong and stops them at the goal line. What a huge momentum swing type play. And you could tell that drive energized this defense, made them believe they knew what was possible. Now, Notre Dame, yes, the next drive comes down and is able to put a touchdown together, put it up 0-6. Boise State blocks the extra point, though, so that's good momentum on their end. But yes, they were able to go down and score. And yes, it was on Banks, so I know it's again going to be another focal point for the Boise State fan base. But he had actually had a really good defensive play the play before, where he'd actually been able to be in great position to deflect a pass. And on that second play, yes, he could have got his head around. That's an issue for the Boise State defenders in general. But it was really a kind of perfect throw, perfect catch type situation. I'm not saying there's nothing Banks could have done in that situation, but it was a really good play by the Notre Dame offense, end up scoring their first touchdown. But then Boise State ends up forcing a punt on the second drive after some great deep coverage by McCoy on an incomplete pass, and then Jake Ripp getting a sack in this game, -5 yards. Jake Ripp had 6 tackles overall in this game, 1.5 tackles for loss and a sack. Huge performance for him, really stepped up in this game. And then drive number 4, they actually force a 4th down stop. Again, 2 4th down stops in this game. 2 4th down stops. Now, I will say, This was one of those luck of the Irish for the Boise State Broncos types of situations, because Notre Dame should have scored a touchdown on this 4th and 8, and they missed a wide open receiver. It was on Banks, but a wide open receiver, and just completely missed it. Completely missed him. Wide open receiver, isn't able to make the catch. It just completely overthrows him. Boise State ends up with a 4th down stop. But they actually did really good in the first half. They forced 2 4th down stops, a punt, and then also they did allow those 2 touchdowns. But overall for Boise State, a really, really solid first half for the Boise State Broncos. About 215 yards of offense overall. Definitely doing enough to give their offense a chance. And when we talk about that punt, that's significant for Notre Dame because they hadn't punted since the Texas A&M game. They'd punted 6 times on the season coming into this game. They punted 3 times in this matchup. So that tells you the level that Boise State stepped up in this game. Again, an offense that put up over 600 yards versus Arkansas. Boise State held them to 3 punts, an offense that had not punted since Texas A&M. So really good performance overall for Boise State defense in the first half, and I think even a better performance in the second half. You talk about overall for this team, they gave up 392 yards, but 215 of those came in the first half, and a couple of those just really on those 2 touchdown drives where they really, a couple missed tackles on drive number 5, and then a holding call gets Notre Dame to the goal line, and they're able to go in and score. But overall, consistently, Boise State was stopping Notre Dame, forcing them into long type situations, consistently overall stopping the run, and also not negating the long passing opportunities. Now, again, Notre Dame, their freshman quarterback, missed a couple of key opportunities, including a potential to end the game on a long touchdown pass. But overall, Boise State's defense did enough, and conversely, Notre Dame's offense did enough. When you talk about winning a game like this against a team as good as this, with yourself being a developmental program right now, at least going through a rebuild, you are going to need the other team to give you some breaks. Well, Notre Dame did that for Boise State. They gave them those breaks. Again, missing a wide open 4th down pass in the second half, killing themselves with penalties. They ended up at 3rd and 25, having to punt. Notre Dame made a ton of mistakes on their end. I'm sure that film session for the Notre Dame Irish was not an enjoyable experience for these players, even though they walked away with a win. They needed to dominate Boise State. If I was Notre Dame looking at these results, I would not be happy with it, and I don't think they were. They needed to dominate Boise State to continue to make their case for the playoffs. A win is good. It keeps them in the running, but it put them behind where their expectations are this season with how good Boise State's defense was, and again, how many opportunities Notre Dame gave to the Boise State Broncos. And the defense did enough, but also Notre Dame did enough. It's the offense really that didn't step up in this game to allow Boise State to get the win. But in the second half for Boise State, they do allow a touchdown drive right off the bat for Notre Dame. Ends up being a situation where it's just an inexperienced smaller corner on a very good player for Notre Dame, and he just bodies out the defender, Sherrod Smith, who's one of those backup players for Boise State who had got some playing time in this game. He's a player that has played well in his time that he has had so far this season, got an interception versus Eastern Washington, I believe it was, might have been Air Force. I forget which game he got an interception in kind of the garbage time at the end of the game, but he has been stepping up, and I love to see these younger players out there. Unfortunately, in this case, the wide receiver just bodies him out. He's unable to make a play on the ball. Ends up being a touchdown. But again, Notre Dame penalties in drive number 2. Drive number 4 for Notre Dame, they end up missing a wide open touchdown. Boise State had their opportunities here in the second half. Notre Dame having to punt the ball a couple of times. Boise State could have come out and won this game. They did not lose this game because of their defense. Now, having said that, Boise State's defense did allow some big break opportunities. Keeley, which put this game really out of reach, was that drive number 3 touchdown. But it's similar to how Boise State, you look at the BYU game, right, in 2020, and Boise State's defense plays really well in the first half, and ends up just breaking down the second half, and the offense can't do anything. You see this with teams when the offense is consistently unable to do anything time and time again. The defense ends up just getting worn down physically, but also emotionally and mentally. It's the thought process of, okay, we're going to try and stop them again, but nothing's going to happen. We've lost this game because the offense can't go out and score. And it was a USF type drive in that opportunity. You know what I'm talking about, the multiple broken tackles like we saw versus USF quarterback. Well, Notre Dame does that with Price. He ends up having a 49-yard run. He breaks like 5 tackles. Will be on his highlight reel. If he's in any kind of end of season award conversation, that will be a play they show. And it's unfortunate because Boise State's defense overall in this game had really played consistently well. They had overall in this matchup done a pretty good job of tackling. Now they missed some tackles and some key opportunities, including the first half where they had an opportunity to stop Notre Dame on one of their touchdown drives, and they missed a 3rd and 6 tackle opportunity. The wide receiver catches the ball short of 3rd down. Boise State misses the tackle. Notre Dame able to convert and then go down and score. So Boise State overall, they'd given up some plays, but they actually played really well. They hadn't had any of these huge break your back type of plays from Notre Dame. A good run by a Notre Dame quarterback, a good run early in the first half by Notre Dame running back, but overall, not really any of these break your back type plays until drive number 3. And that's unfortunate that is going to be the way that a lot of people remember this defensive performance because of that run. But I think the way you really should be remembering this defensive performance is the 28 points given up. This was a Boise State defense that did exactly what they needed to allow Boise State a chance to win this game, and unfortunately unable to because primarily the offensive issues overall. So for Boise State's defense, I'm going to give them a B-. I know that they allowed some big plays, but I was really impressed by what I saw out of this Boise State defense. A defense that has been much maligned overall, but the linebacker core really stepped up, a position that has really come on strong in the back end of the year. The secondary overall really stepped up. Notre Dame hurt themselves by missing some deep pass opportunities, but the Boise State defense was also in key position on several of those deep plays. Really no true deep throws allowed by Notre Dame, which is really impressive considering how pass prolific this Notre Dame freshman. He's going to be incredible for Notre Dame, definitely a future NFL prospect. And Boise State defense and then secondary, again, a second game in a row where the Boise State secondary really did a great job of stepping up. And so overall, Boise State defense going to give them a solid B-. For the special teams for Boise State, this was, you talk about losing the games in the margins. This was another position on the team that did not step up the way that it needed to. Oscar Doyle, who's been fantastic for Boise State so far this season, had an off game. So Max Mess had an off game. So did Oscar Doyle in this matchup. 4 punts for 38.8 yard average. He had 0 punts inside the 20. He actually had 1 punt that only went 20 yards. It was a real opportunity for Boise State to pin Notre Dame back deep, and ball ends up bouncing at the 20 and rolling out to the 21. They also had a long punt return allowed where I don't think that was on the punter. It didn't look like he outkicked the coverage, but the coverage unit fell down trying to tackle the returner. He returned it for 23 yards. And because Boise State had been pushed back and a bunch of penalty yards, the ball actually got past the original first down that Boise State would have had. They were almost back to the original line of scrimmage. So real disaster moment type there for Boise State. They did block an extra point. So that was a huge opportunity by Feely coming up the middle and blocking extra point. No opportunities to kick the ball because of interceptions, that kind of situation. Never getting in a position where they had an opportunity to kick. But for Boise State's secondary, special teams overall, they didn't do anything to truly lose this game for Boise State, but they certainly didn't have a stellar performance overall. And so for the special teams unit, going to give them a solid C+ as well. So for Boise State, how did they perform against my keys to the game in this matchup? And we're almost done. Well, passing game, take the spotlight. They were asked to. They needed to, and unfortunately they didn't, so that's going to be an F. For Boise State, don't make the little mistakes. They made little mistakes time and time again in this game. When you look at what consistently lost this matchup, it wasn't necessarily the quarterback play. It was the little mistakes by everybody, by the quarterback, by the wide receivers, by the offensive line. This was a complete loss by this Boise State offense. Yes, shared equally across the defense and special teams, but the key position that had the most little mistakes that lost this game is that Boise State offense, and so a solid F there as well. And then don't panic. I don't think Boise State did panic, at least defensively in this game. I know I said they gave up last play in part because they're getting worn down, but Boise State still stepped up on the last drive. On that very last drive, when the game is out of hand, they could have allowed Notre Dame to go down and score a big one on there. And even though the pass was underthrown, Benefield and I think it's Robinson, one of the newer players here for Boise State, hasn't got a ton of playing time. But Franklin, Benefield and Franklin managing to get back and catch up. And so Notre Dame gives them an opportunity, and they're able to fulfill it. They were able to get back, be in enough of a position to go and influence that play. And so the Boise State defense didn't give up in this game. The Boise State offense, I'm going to say, they did panic in this matchup. They still were in this game late. Even after the missed 4th down, they were still in this game late. And those 2 interceptions, I think, are emblematic of an offense that was starting to panic. And so for Boise State in this game overall, I'm going to give this a D+ for don't panic. So for Boise State, a disappointing result. Yes. But 28-7 is also not bad versus Notre Dame, a team that should be a top 10 program based on how they've played this season. A couple of bad breaks and they end up being just out a late end of the top 25 type team. But this could be a playoff team. This really could be. I really don't see a way that this Notre Dame team loses the rest of the way out. I expect them to win out, and I expect them to be in a position to challenge for a position in the playoff. Now, are they going to do it, especially with a 28-7 type performance now, which will be held against them? I don't know. But this is a very, very good Notre Dame team, and Boise State only lost 28-7. At the same time, when you start comparing recent matchups, like I said with that Arkansas game, a team that got destroyed 56-13 with a former Boise State Bronco at the helm, that did not happen to this Boise State team. Boise State, when you start, the comparison has to be made between Max Madsen and Taylor Green. Max Madsen, 22 of 37 for 215 yards, 4 picks. Taylor Green, 13 of 32 for only 207 yards and an interception. Max Madsen actually a little more consistent in this game. Now, Taylor Green obviously had 81 yards rushing. That's part of his gift. Max Madsen's legs actually very good in this game as well. He actually ended up without negative yards, even though he took a ton of sacks because he was really good at scrambling. So it's good to see him back to full health. He wasn't versus App State. He was in this game. His health is not a reason for the poor performance in this matchup. So it was good to see him back to the full health. But Boise State didn't get Arkansas in this game. They didn't get destroyed, and that was a road game. Boise State was at Notre Dame, at home, a team that wanted to demolish them. They wanted to come out and clear the air from the group of 5 upsets they've dealt with in the past. They were motivated and dedicated. They knew this game was a playoff type game for them. Every single game the rest of the way off is a playoff type game for Notre Dame. They have to impress. They were clearly focused. I think it's why you saw these 4th down attempts instead of kicking the field goal, because they wanted to dominate in this matchup. And Boise State only lost 28-7. I think there's a lot of things you take away looking at this defensive performance for Boise State that you can hang your hat on and say Boise State's defense is starting to become a part of the team that is going to win them games down the stretch. But this Boise State offense, that gives me the most concerns right now. And I think as a fan overall, if there's one takeaway from this team, from this performance, is that you don't have an offense that can go out and beat the Notre Dames of the world. Because that's the expectations of a Boise State fan. It's not go out and win the Mountain West. That's a side goal, but it's not the focus as a fan of this program. The expectations of this program is not go out and be a mid-level, upper mid-level group of 5 team. It's go out there and be a top 10 team. Like Boise State has been in the past. Go out and compete with and beat the Notre Dames of the world. That is the expectation for this Boise State program. That's what fans expect. And this offense didn't show that Boise State can go out and do that. And whether it is due to other factors or not, the focus of that negativity is going to be the quarterback play in this game. Boise State did not have an explosive passing offense in this matchup. When the running game was stopped, when they only were able to put up 100 yards rushing, the passing game did not step up. Boise State may have had some good plays here and there to keep drives going, but there weren't any deep passes. Boise State's longest throw was 28 yards, and that was with yards after catch. The longest throw through the air was about 18 yards or so. Every single throw was a low to mid-level pass. Every single one. Notre Dame was able to come down because they knew that there was no threat over the top. There was none in this game. And so for Boise State, when you're looking at the future of this program, and specific, not looking through the rest of this year, because I think you see a team, what we've seen so far, that can go through and probably go and win the Mountain West. The defense has been good enough, especially the last couple of games, to give you some hope. And the offense, from what we've seen in the past, we know they can go out and play against lower mid-level defenses. But when you're looking at it, putting a team in 3rd year for Spencer Danielson, 3rd year of trying to reestablish this Boise State program, there are some big questions for 2026. That is the prove it year. That's the first year of the new Pac-12. That's the 3rd year of Spencer Danielson, and they're going to go out and play Oregon again. Can this team beat Oregon? I don't think you would say yes right now. And it all comes down to the focal point of that offense here in Max Madsen. And what he put on the table today versus Notre Dame, what he put on the table versus USF, neither of those games versus the 2 better teams Boise State has played this season gives you any hope for the future in that area. And so for Max Madsen, the rest of the year just became his own mini playoff. Every single game is a prove-it year for him. Proving it to the fan base at a lower level, but more importantly, to this coaching staff. Proving it to this coaching staff that he is, as they say, the only quarterback in the Mountain West they would want on their team. Those are big words coming from Spencer Nelson. And I think that when the fan base hears that and they don't hear Spencer Nelson raining down the fire and fury in a press conference after a game like this, they get frustrated. What Spencer Nelson is doing is he knows that you have already identified the issues with Max Matson in this game. He doesn't need to draw any more focus there. He is trying to draw attention when he says the wide receiver core didn't get open. He's trying to draw attention to the fact that there were other issues as well, that this was a team loss. That is what he's trying to emphasize. He's not trying to say that Max Matson was perfect, even though that may come across in some of the things that he says. The focus is he already knows you've identified the issues Max Matson has. He wants you to also see the issues the rest of the offense had and be able to be focused on the fact that this was a group loss for Boise State, and it was. It was a bad game by Max Matson, but it was also a bad game by the offensive line and the penalties that they had, and also a bad game in parts by some of these wide receivers that had a lot of consistent drops throughout the game. So this was a bad game overall, and also who struggled to get open as well. This is a bad game overall for the Boise State offense. But that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, because it keeps happening. When Boise State's running game stops, the passing game can't win. And whether that's a coordinator issue or wide receiver issue or quarterback issue, something has to change, because this will not work in 2026. The nostalgia of Boise State and the unique facts of Bluefield is only going to last so long. Next year is a prove-it year for this program. Under a new conference, if they're trying to overcome East Coast bias and show that the Pac-12 is a strong conference at the top of the group of 5, next year is a prove-it year for Boise State. It's a prove-it year that all these years after the Kellen Moore and Chris Peterson, Brian Harsin era, that Boise State is still a team that can go out and compete at the top level of not just the group of 5, but the Power 4 as well. Next year is that prove-it season. And you have got to have the players in place, and coordinators too, across and coaches as a staff as a whole. All the questions that have been raised for Boise State throughout this season. You have to have all of those pieces, the right pieces, in place in year 3 if Boise State is going to be able to go out and make the statement that they need to in 2026. That's what the rest of this season is. It's building towards that. The playoffs, after a loss to Notre Dame, even after the loss to USF, off the table. Yes, theoretically, you could still come back in if there was massive chaos, a Liberty getting in-esque type situation that we saw. But Boise State would need crazy things to happen, just like Liberty needed 3 or 4 lost teams. Boise State's now in that situation. They need every other team to have 3 or 4 losses to have a chance as a Mountain West champion at 10-2 to be able to get in, to even have a chance. So at this point, Boise State, those odds are off the table. Their focus now is winning the Mountain West, which is a good goal to go out strong. But more than that, it's building a team for 2026. The defense has shown that they can be a unit that can be developed and built for 2026. I've loved what I've seen out of them in this game and last week. Special teams, we'll see. Not the biggest focal point from this. But the offense for Boise State, these are consistent issues that Boise State has shown every time they've faced a caliber opponent. Going back to last year, even when they had Ashton Jeanty. And you don't have Ashton Jeanty anymore to make up for these factors. Whatever needs to change, that change needs to be made before 2026, before you roll into next year. And so for these wide receivers, for Maddox Matson, for the coordinator staff, the rest of the year is their prove-it year. That is their focus. There's a lot to play for this Boise State offense. A lot to play for. To prove that the quarterback you have in place right now, the wide receivers you have in place right now, and the coordinator you have in place right now are enough to go out and win the way that you expect to win in 2026 and be back at the top level of college football. So when you face another Notre Dame type program, you can walk away with a win, or at least a very close 2024 type performance like we saw versus Oregon. And again, that was Ashton Jeanty that gave Boise that chance. When you need to have a team that gives you that chance. And right now, what we've seen, this offense doesn't have that ability. They just don't have that. Once the running game breaks down, they don't have the ability to fall back on the passing game and win games through the air. They just don't right now. And so the rest of the season is Boise State's opportunity to prove that they can develop that for the future. And if they can't develop that for the future, we're starting to get into the realm of the territory. And I'm not going to call for any player to be benched or fired, because I don't think we're at that point yet. Max Manson's had 2 bad games. USF and Notre Dame. But he has the rest of the season to prove that he can be the player that we've seen flashes of and that this coaching staff tells us he can be. That's what the rest of this season is. The rest of the season is a prove-it year for Mattson, and I'm excited to see where this gets back on track, hopefully, versus New Mexico and the rest of the year. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your own thoughts in the comments below, your own expectations for the future for this Boise State program, and again, your own thoughts from the review video and also just from the game itself. Anything you have, please put in the comments below. And of course, make sure that you pick yourself up a bottle of Horseshoe Spirits. Make sure you ask for it at your local liquor store in the southwest of Idaho. If they don't have it, make sure that you ask for it by name and they'll get it in for you. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!